Welcome to the Exploring Potential podcast, where we delve into the realm of unique and novel ideas within organizations. Join us as we uncover the driving force behind innovation and success by engaging in thought-provoking conversations and stories with some of the brightest minds in various fields. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to the Exploring Potential podcast. I'm your host, Brett King. According to Morgan Stanley, 2024 is expected to be a year of increased mergers and acquisitions activity, with some sectors seeing a 50% increase in deal volumes. With a business climate supporting mergers and acquisitions throughout many different industries right now, we wanted to address this process from the perspective of combining company cultures and maximizing employee engagement. We're going to dive into a specific example of a recent acquisition that took place in the movie theater industry, where Santikos Entertainment acquired 17 geographically dispersed locations from Southern theaters. Santikos Entertainment is a San Antonio, Texas-based theater chain with formerly 10 locations. Santikos now operates 27 theaters in 8 states in the Southeast U.S., from North Carolina down to Texas, in addition to an impressive real estate portfolio of 1.2 million square feet. While theaters certainly may offer much of the same product at the end of the day, I can personally attest to the fact that theater operations, and particularly organizational culture, vary widely amongst different circuits. Today, we'll get a firsthand glimpse into the challenges and opportunities created during mergers and acquisitions, and critically, why focusing on culture and employee engagement is important to the overall success of our organizations throughout this process. So, before I introduce our experienced guest, who is quite the expert on this subject, I want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor. Today's episode of the Exploring Potential podcast is proudly presented by Cinetrain, providing the highest quality employee training, onboarding, and development solutions for cinemas across the US, Canada, and Latin America. Cinetrain helps cinemas attract and retain top talent, standardize onboarding and training, and increase revenue while decreasing operational costs. You can learn more at cinetrain.com. Now, I'm thrilled to welcome to the show Tim Handren, CEO at Santikos Entertainment. Prior to Santikos, Tim was co-founder and CEO of an outsourcing company, CSG, also based in San Antonio. This company grew from concept to over 800 employees over 5 years, culminating in a sale to a multinational strategic buyer. Tim has also been an independent consultant over the past 15 years, advising CEOs and senior executives in Fortune 500 companies on culture, customer service, operational efficiency, and strategic growth. Prior to that, Tim was the COO at USAA, a Fortune 100 financial services company. During his 21 years at USAA, Tim's responsibilities included strategic and operational planning, operational excellence, information technology, customer service, and chief ethics officer. During this time, USAA was recognized as number 1 in customer service in the US by Businessweek, Forrester Research, and Forbes. The combined experiences of a complex Fortune 100 company and a brand new entrepreneurial venture have honed Tim's business skills to be agile, disciplined, creative, and focused. These same skills have helped him transform Santikos into a far more efficient and effective theater and real estate company over the past 5+ years. Tim also served as the mayor of Boerne, Texas for 4 years. Tim has been married for 30 years and is an avid race car driver, pilot in training, cook, birdwatcher, outdoorsman, gardener, golfer, and most recently, a chicken farmer. Tim, what a sincerely impressive background. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate you having me on, Brett. I know the chicken farming thing piqued your interest. I know that had to.
It certainly did. I could not keep that in there. We had to call that out. I love it. Well, before we get too far in, Tim, would you mind just giving us a quick background of the history of Santikos and just your personal experience that brought you to where you are today?
No, yeah, glad to, because it's actually a really cool story. Santikos is a company that's named after a family, and the most recent, or the last in the family line, John Santikos, decided before he died, he put this entire company, which is, as you described earlier, it was about 12 theaters in the San Antonio area, plus pretty big real estate. He put that all in a trust, and he said when he dies, he did die in December of 2014, he wanted the businesses to continue to operate with the profitability of the businesses going to a local foundation called the San Antonio Area Foundation. And they would in turn distribute money into all the local nonprofits. Since his death in December of 2014, Santikos has given approximately $125 million back to the local community where we are. And so what's really cool about this organization is it's got a much higher calling. It's not just about being a movie theater company like so many others. And what our employees really gravitate toward is we are doing really socially immense goodness in this community, which is kind of cool. I had joined the board of Santikos in 2017, and we made a change in 2018, and the board asked me to step in this role. I said, no, I don't want to do that right now. I was happily retired. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll do this for 4 months. That's it. I'll be an interim guy. You go start a search. And in that 4-month period that I was here, I kind of fell in love with the people in the company and the business. So here I am 5.5 years later into my 4-month gig.
It's been a long 4 months.
It's been a long 4 months. Yeah, that's an understatement.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Now, your company, Santikos, recently made a significant acquisition of Southern Theaters, which I know kind of goes by a couple different names in terms of, who owned them. But could you give us just a high-level overview of the scope and scale of what that deal looked like?
Yeah.
You don't have to get into numbers or anything like that. Just more so kind of laying the groundwork.
Sure. Yeah. So Southern Theaters was, it's 2 different theater groups that they had acquired over almost a 20-year period, the Grand Theaters and the Amstar Theaters in the Southeast states that you mentioned. And they had been for sale for a while. And, as the pandemic hit in 2020, a lot of companies suffered. A lot of businesses have just gone under. We actually did okay during the pandemic. As you recall, Brett, we were actually the first theater company to open in the country on May 2nd of 2020.
Yes.
And one of the things that we were able to do prior to the pandemic, and then it was frankly a little bit of luck, but the company's finance situation when I got here wasn't that great. I had all of 2018 and 2019 to clean that up. So after we go into the pandemic and people are having a hard time because we were shut down for so long as an industry, we actually did pretty good. And so economically, financially, we were positioned really, really well last year to look at potential acquisitions while some people were trying to get out of the business. Southern Theaters is it's in the Southeast. We like the locations they had. They had already reclined all their theaters, which was important to us from a customer experience standpoint. And so we started talking to them in January of last year, and in July 17th was when the actual transaction closed. So it was a good match for us, a good fit from a cultural standpoint. And overall, the theaters are actually in pretty good shape. And so we were happy to be able to grow from almost the 40th largest exhibitor or theater company in the country to the 7th in the country.
Wow. All overnight, essentially.
Literally overnight. Yeah, literally overnight.
Yeah, it's of course more complex than that, but yeah, it literally happens overnight, right? When you actually close the deal. So
it does, yeah.
You went from 10 to 27. That's really impressive.
It was fun. There's a little bit of it's daunting to do something like that because we had operated only in the San Antonio area, and there were lots of questions that like our board had. How are you going to manage 8 states away, all these different locations? And the answer was kind of simple. Well, we're going to keep the management team in place that has been doing it, and so not that I have to figure it out. We'll keep all the folks from facilities management and all the other things that were going on. We kept almost everybody on staff, and so it felt good as we went into it. Felt pretty confident. And then 2 weeks after we closed was when Hollywood went on strike for the next 6 months. It was great timing.
man. Oh, nothing like that timing right there. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I'm an Irishman. I thought I was lucky. Once we got into that situation, about 2 months after the strike started, July, September, October, I said, we're going to have to switch gears now because we can't just leave things as is. This is going to be a pretty rough. It was almost like a second pandemic is what it felt like to probably all of us in the industry because Hollywood shut down for so long. We're still feeling that today. So I decided then we're going to go on warp speed and we're going to make some changes that I didn't intend to make originally. So we got to get things 100% streamlined, 100% operationally efficient, and we're going to go a little bit more quickly on the cultural changes that we needed to make. So that all started last October. And here we are. Here we are now, 10 months now after the acquisition, and everything is 100% homogenous. All the systems have been converted, which is a Herculean task. We did it all this past month. Culturally, I would say that things are going really, really well, surprisingly well. And from a team member standpoint, it's almost all the same people that were there before, but with a very, very different direction that we're headed. And they notice how different it is. And so, yeah, it's been really interesting journey to go through for me and my entire management team.
It sounds very interesting. And first of all, kudos to you for being able to keep that talent on, because I think from a consistency standpoint for the rest of the teams, there's a lot of value to be had in that. But I know that's not always possible when going through something like this. And then not only did you weather, a large deal, but you went right into the strike like we talked about. But it sounds like you handled that in the same way you handled COVID, where you just buckled down and, got a few things on warp speed, if you will, and kind of moved forward. And I want to dig further into some of those specifics. But first I want to ask, some might look at the merging of two movie theater companies as a simple one, right? Like in the grand scheme of M&A, right? Like they might just say, well, they're both movie theater companies, right? But we know that's not the case, Tim. I know that just from talking to you, and I know that just from being in the industry. So what are some of those critical areas where there can be key differences that could potentially impact the overall success of an acquisition or merger like that?
Yeah, well, I'll name like 3 or 4 of the major areas that I would look at. Number one is people, right? And how people have been trained. You don't just trade teams and all of a sudden you operate the same way. So people would be probably the most important one. There's processes, how things get done, and or lack of process. I'm a huge process guy. When I was at USAA, right, I'm a master black belt in Six Sigma terms. The team I've been working with for 5 years is highly disciplined around process because that's just something that I put in place. But the team we acquired had no process, and that's radically different than I'm accustomed to. It's actually what I walked into when I got to Santikos 5.5 years ago. There's the systems component, and because you've been around the industry a long time, every movie theater company has its own set of systems. Much of it doesn't work well together. It's a bunch of independent things. And most of the people that are in the movie business aren't technology geeks. I'm an IT guy by background, and I'm a big nerd, a big geek. And so I know how to get things to work together, which is, to me, that's kind of fun. It's like a puzzle that we're trying to figure out. So those are the 3 big things. And then, the 4th thing that's a little bit different is now I have to worry about weather in 7 other states that I never had to worry about, and there's things like, coastlines that I'm now on instead of in San Antonio where I'm protected from everything. There's thunderstorms that kind of roll through some of those different parts of the country that we're in now. So I have to pay attention to the Weather Channel in a different way. It's not just what my temperature is in my backyard. It's what's going on across half the country right now. Those are all some pretty big differences.
Those can be enormous differences. I mean, even just which almost felt like an afterthought, even just the geographical differences, create new operational challenges or things that to your point, you're paying attention to weather on a different part of the country now. But I think these other things are really industry agnostic. You mentioned people, process, and systems. that really is what it comes down to. Everybody operates differently. So when we talk about, well, it's just a movie theater combining with another movie theater. Well, no, every movie theater has different people, different processes, different systems. Hey, let's throw geography in there, right? Like those are really key considerations.
And then you encapsulate all that in the nuance of culture, right? Which is so radically, there is so much in nuance and culture, right? But to me, it's the most important thing, and it's an interesting thing. I love talking about culture with lots of people because you could take a textbook definition of what we have a shared value system and we operate in a certain way, right? But to me, culture, there's so much to it that's small. Like I'm in a T-shirt today, and you think about culture and cultures around the world, not business cultures, but we dress in certain ways, right? And that says something, right? Yeah. And when I first got here, and the company we acquired, they were all wearing, old stodgy kind of stuff. And I said, hey, this is a movie theater. Why aren't we just wearing T-shirts around and have movie themes in our T-shirt? That's more fun to me. It generates conversation. It's something so subtle as a T-shirt, all the way up to ethical values or philosophical principles by which we operate. That's a broad topic. I could talk about culture for days and days and days because it's so critical to our success.
I love that you brought up culture because that's exactly where I was hoping to go next. And Tim, that was when you and I first met, I think our conversation we railroaded the conversation we had. We were on with another gentleman, and I think you and I were just nerding out about culture. And from that conversation, I was like, Tim, you and I need to stay close and in touch, and because we seem to value a lot of the same things. For the purposes of this conversation, because I do want to talk about the combination of cultures. You already started doing this, but would you give us just a quick definition of how you would define company culture in this from this perspective that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, and I actually do this with all my management team on a pretty regular basis. But fundamentally, it is that shared value system, that shared belief system, again, by which we are going to make decisions and how we're going to treat each other. A common philosophical principle in terms of, again, how do we treat each other, meaning employee to employee, how do we treat each other there? And then in turn, how do we treat our guests? Those are the fundamental things about it. If I were to put kind of a textbook definition around it, right? But then the subtleties and the nuance of every single day, there's an accountability factor, right? And there's a excellence and attitude factor. You're gonna laugh at me when I say this, but there's a take care of your personal body, right? Which I view as a lifetime sentence. It's not an option to exercise and take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself every day. That's what makes you the best you can be every day. And that becomes part of our culture, right? Yes. So there's so many things that go into it for me, but those would be probably the big ones that I would focus on.
I think that's really well put. Being a culture nerd myself, I thought that was a perfect definition there. So that brings us to, and I'm going to load the deck here because I'm going to just assume you agree that this is important. And you can tell me if I'm wrong. But why is it important to be intentional about the combination of cultures and operations when you go through a merger or acquisition like you've done? Why is that important to really take that into consideration? Again, I'm just assuming you agree with me that that's important, but I feel like that's a pretty safe bet.
Oh, that's a no-brainer bet right there, right? Fundamentally, what is a company, right? And the most fundamental thing that a company actually is, it's a composition of the people that we have that work here. And what is it that we do in our company? We provide an experience, we provide services to our guests, but it's how we treat people. So the most fundamental thing that we have to worry about every single day is exactly what culture is to me, which is how we treat each other. And if you don't do that with intention, if you don't do that with focus, if you don't do that with an end game in mind, you're just meandering down you're just a leaf in a meandering, river. Where in the heck are you going to end up? Which shore are you going to be on? And did you intend to be there? To me, I've been a planner since I was 7 years old. That's a funny story, but again, if you don't do it with intention, then your culture will be exactly what you intended unintentionally,
Yeah.
which is a mess, right? And I see that in more companies that the culture is not intentional. There's a byproduct that turns into some culture, whether it's good or bad. Most of the time I find cultures are not good if they don't really think about it every single day. And it has to start at the top of the house, which is me and my company. If I don't talk about and think about and act with a sense of urgency around what I want our culture to be every single day, then how can I expect anyone else to do that? It's super important to me. I talk about culture inside our company practically every day.
I love it. And once again, that's why we get along so well. You're talking about it so much. I had a great conversation with Rich Daughtridge of Warehouse Cinemas, and he brought up a great point that, if you're not intentional about culture is going to exist whether you've defined it or not.
Absolutely.
So it's in your best interest to actually intentionally define it, because otherwise a culture is going to emerge and it may or may not be what you're actually looking for.
Yeah. Again, I see that in so many companies. And what's funny is there's a funny story you should look up sometime. It's called the road to Abilene, or the trip to Abilene, where people are talking about why in the world are we in Abilene, Texas? Why did we do this? Well, I thought you wanted to go. Well, I didn't want to go. Well, I didn't want to go. You get there, nobody wants to be there, but everybody is party to how they got there, but they don't understand how or why. It's crazy what I see in so many cultures when I've done some consulting, and I'm talking big companies and small companies.
And you would have seen a lot, given your roles that we kind of teed up in your bio in the beginning. The consulting you've done, you've seen this in several industries, you've seen this in several companies, different sizes, I'm sure. And it seems like there's a consistency there.
100%, right. And what I see in most senior leaders, after a certain amount of time, they are not necessarily, and I'm saying this generically, I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but I see people acting more out of defense and protectionism versus playing offense, not being offensive, but playing offense and trying to get the whole team to win, right? People are just protecting what they've built over time, and they forget that they're there to take care of everyone else around them when they're in a management position, especially senior leaders. It's a fundamental flaw that I see in so many companies, and everybody sees it, but they don't want to talk about it.
Right. They kind of sweep that one under the rug.
It's just, we know that there's a bad actor there, but we don't talk about it. But everybody knows there's a bad actor there, right? It's a shame.
Yep. You're absolutely right. Having just gone through this process, what are the biggest challenges when bringing two completely, I don't know how completely different they were, but bringing two different cultures together? Because you clearly, you had established one at Santikos original before the deal. What were the biggest challenges of bringing the new theaters on board with the culture that you have built that is thriving at Santikos?
Yeah, it's an really interesting question, because it generally, depending on the size of the company, right, it may take anywhere from 1 to 4 years to inculcate a culture. And it's not to say, hey, you guys have to be like us. It's finding the best of, right? And so what I started doing with the management team that we acquired, we started having a conversation just about expectations. And because if you don't state expectations, then the assumptions will start being made, right? And the company that we acquired had been owned by a private equity firm, and they weren't really in the business of customer experience. They were in the business of making as much money as they could for whoever their investors were. So for the group we acquired, it's an about face. No, everything we do is about customer experience. Everything is going to be focused on that. But more importantly, everything's going to be focused on making sure we take care of our employees. And right away, you see people's heads snap. What? You care about us? Yeah, we care about each other. That, again, I'm going to go back to the from a cliche standpoint, the forming, storming, norming, performing phase of team building that everyone has to go through. We started that forming very quickly by setting expectations about caring about each other as human beings, caring about each other as fellow employees, caring about our guests, and caring about that experience. That was a huge shift. It sounds so basic and fundamentally right. A lot of people say those words, but they don't act in that way. So starting to set those expectations and then demonstrating in everyday actions that, no, we actually do care about you. And we actually want you to care about each other. We started making subtle changes. And then we would, every time we made a change management is really important as you're going about changing culture, continually paint a contextual picture about why we're making these changes. It's not just because this is the way we've always done it and the way you've always done it is wrong. It's about, no, here's why we do this and here's how we want you to think about things. And it's getting to that, again, that philosophical perspective and that shared value system and handing it to people, literally, and saying, this is how we expect everyone to start acting and operating, without it being a stick approach, right? It's more of a carrot approach. And then you'll laugh at this too, but it's, sometimes taking a couple of letters out of words and going to a we versus us and they. So that 2-letter word is so powerful. In fact, I have to be really overt when we're talking with all of our team members that it's not you guys that we acquired and us guys, the good guys. There's only a we that we're going to talk about as we go forward. And some of the practices we're going to put in place might be new to all of us, but some of them are going to be practices that we've been using for the last 5 years that we want you to start using, right? We're going to teach you how to do process. We're going to convert all this technology. We're going to move a lot of your cheese here pretty soon. But understand why and keep painting that picture, right? I'm a big believer that people don't internalize something until they've heard it 7 times, 7 different ways. And so living by that as a expectation that, okay, if I tell you one time, it doesn't mean you're going to get it. And I can't fairly expect anyone to say after they've heard it one time, they got it. So my team that I've had for the last 5 years, they understand that is a management style. That's part of our culture. And bringing the new group along with those same kinds of, that same tenet, having them come to San Antonio where we were all together as one giant group of managers, that happened. And then explaining, again, here's where we're headed. Here's why we're doing the things we're doing. I would tell you, Brett, that after 5 months, the management team, the acquired group, said, can we go a little bit faster? Because we love everything that we're doing. We love all this change. And I said, hang on, guys, there's a lot that's coming. You're gonna want us to slow down here pretty soon. No, we can take it. And then when we did all those changes this past month, they asked, can we just slow down for a minute? I said, I don't want to tell you I told you so, but yeah. Again, bringing people along, good change management skills, constant contextual communication. That was how we've been doing it, and it's gone really, really well.
Clearly, I love it. And sorry, I'm just making a couple last minute notes here because I'd love to summarize what you had just said in terms of some tactical, if it's fair to consider it this, these sound like some really tactical steps you took to gain buy-in and bring this new part of your team along with your team. And I love how you used we. It's not us and them. It's now we're all in it together.
Yep.
And if I could summarize what you had said, you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. So you clearly set expectations. Those expectations were caring, not only internally, but also about the guest. So you really made those expectations clear. You demonstrated those expectations each day by your actions that you care about them, and here's how we're going to care about our guests. And then you started introducing subtle changes. And as part of the subtle changes you introduced, you implemented some change management into that, as in, from its most simple to in terms of saying, this is why we're going to make this change. That's a great, way to talk about change management. You actually brought up, I believe you're referring to the book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
fair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great book about change. Highly recommend it. Change management. And yeah, it was. I heard you talk about the cheese. I'm like, that's got to be the book, right? And then the last point you had made is what I brought up at the beginning is it's all of us. It's not us and them. And it's not like, hey, come do things our way no matter what. You had said we're taking the best of kind of both sides. Did I do justice in recapping some of the tactical steps that you took?
Oh,
is there
absolutely.
anything that you'd add or revise to that?
Yeah, you could probably take that and go write a book and make a ton of money, Brett.
We'll share the royalties. Now, so that was big on people and culture, which is obviously critical. It was the number one thing you had talked about, let's talk about processes and systems sort of together, because you had recently told me that you had, and I think you had announced it on the show as well, that you finally got everybody on the same systems. Now, what does this mean for you, and why was this such a significant milestone in the process of M&A?
Yeah. So let's just think about how a theater kind of operates, right? From the moment you're buying a ticket. So we had two very different websites, the Santikos one and the acquired one. We have mobile apps, two very different mobile apps. We have a point of sale system behind that. So when you buy your ticket or you're buying your concessions, we had two different point of sale systems. We have two accounting systems, the way credit cards and the way we had two different banks. We have very different places where all the credit cards live, the way we pay bills, the way we receive bills, what's expected of the general managers, 100% different in the two groups, right? Because we have two of everything, even the payroll systems, right? Or the HR HRIS, HR information systems of record. So getting everything to one, you can obviously tell it's going to make a huge difference just in terms of how we operate, right? But sure. By getting to one, incidentally, we converted both of the websites to a brand new website. So we didn't take the new guys and say, you're going to just blend into what we did. We created an entirely different experience for our guests, but collapsed everything down. So that's about 6 different systems that we had down to, that we had 2 of everything, and now we have 1. But the consequence of going to those same systems now is now we were able to start making the same process changes. I'm not talking procedures because I'm a process guy. Now we can make the same process changes across the board. That allows us all to move as one group, as opposed to 2 different groups with 2 different processes and 2 different sets of systems, right?
Right.
The next part that comes out of that, which is the coolest part for me, is for our general managers in the acquired locations, they would spend the majority of their time in their office doing paperwork, because the jobs that they were doing, the way they were doing those jobs, the focus was on something entirely different. What I want our general managers focused on is, number 1, taking care of the employees, and number 2, taking care of the guests. I don't want them in their office, because you can't do either one of those from an office, right? So by getting all the things into this common set of systems, common set of processes, we're alleviating all that office work off of them, because we put in a lot of automation. And now the expectation of them is that get out of your office, and I want you out with all the people, right, culturally, that you're there to tend, to shepherd, to help. And that is coming to life finally. And that's the part that's cool for me, is now we're really making a big change in terms of how each of those theaters operates. We look at Net Promoter Score, by the way. I know you're familiar with that. That's Fred Reichheld is the inventor of that, and one of the very first places he tested that was at USAA when I worked there. So I'm a huge fan of Net Promoter Score. The Net Promoter Score of the acquired group was in the low 60s when we acquired them. And if you know anything about Net Promoter Score, to move like 2, 3, 5 per points on that scale is really hard. Today, year to date, the acquired group is at a 72. Net Promoter Score, which is a very good number.
You made a jump. Yeah.
And so it's not, I didn't make a jump. What allowed that to happen? Why is the guest experience that much better? It's the same people. It's the same theaters. What's different? It's the attitude. It's the culture that they feel when they're inside those theaters. And if the guests can feel it, wow, it's a pretty monumental move, in my opinion. And who gets the credit for that? The team members inside each of those theaters. I'll take a little credit because we're bringing them along in a way that's a different way, a radically different way than they're accustomed to, of thinking about taking care of employees and taking care of guests, right? But so that it's a little bit of a long answer to your question. It wasn't about changing the systems. That's pretty boring. It's the cool part. That's the end product of this, is freeing up the manager's time, having one common way to do everything, with the emphasis being take care of your employees and take care of your guests. Get the systems out of the way and get the processes out of the way. It's pretty cool.
Right. And the faster you can do that, not that you want to rush the process, but it seems like the faster you can do that, the faster you can have much more impactful productivity from those leaders and within both sides of the organization.
100%.
Which starts to melt away. I don't even like saying both sides of the organization, because you've been so intentional about, hey, it's all one, but taking them and bringing them together allows for so much more efficient production and effectiveness of operations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it makes sense as a priority. Yeah, awesome. And you started a perfect segue, because I wanted to ask very intentionally, taking it from an external perspective, how do you take into consideration guest experience throughout a process like this, where you're taking two companies, bringing them together? How do you consider the guest experience throughout that whole process?
Yeah. So again, Net Promoter Score is one way that we look at measuring, guest satisfaction, guest experience, all that other stuff. The other thing is putting in place aligning our value system around the employees and the guests with the bonus program that's in place. So that all got put in, and that was all very new ways of thinking about things for the acquired group, because they were told, squeeze a nickel out of a penny and give it back to the owner, right? We're actually spending money investing in those theaters, in those people, in training programs that they've never had, and getting that across the board to result in a good guest experience. And so we talk about that with a lot of regularity, what a guest experience should feel like, right? People are getting out of their house, they're going to a movie theater for a wonderful escape from their life. And it starts with the most basic thing, and I use this phrase all the time. All I ask of every one of our employees, it's super simple. And every employee gets the same video and the same ask from me that joins the company. Look people in the eye, smile, and say hi. That's all you have to do. And you already make a huge difference, right? Yep. Versus so many places or so many companies that I know that you walk into, that I walk into, we observe the employees and we can see, their heads down, their faces in their phone, they don't smile, Yep. They're not happy to be there. You feel that as a guest, right? Yep. And so this is what we talk about. And again, this is that context. Why do we want the culture to be so maniacal about taking care of each other and taking care of our guests? It's because it's a great outcome, and it's exactly the product that we offer, a great experience, right? Because everybody shows the same movies. Yep. But why is Santikos now the choice to go to versus, say, an AMC or a Regal? It's going to be just a very different experience. That's what I would tell you. I'm not saying anything bad about those other folks, but I just want ours to stand out as, wow, everybody seems like they're actually happy to be at work, and they're happy to take care of me. That's a great feeling.
That's a wonderful feeling that keeps you coming back, because you feel like you're cared for, you feel like you're getting that attention. So if I heard you correctly, to really lock in this and increase the positivity behind the guest experience, it's really determined by culture and training and your people. That's what really determines your guest experience. Is that a fair summary?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it, because I preach the same. I often will say, to theaters, the actual experience of your brand, what your brand truly is what people experience with your frontline employees. You could do the coolest marketing campaign, have the coolest logo. At the end of the day, your brand is what that frontline employee gives to that guest. That's their experience of your brand.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
In fact,
to an extent.
Our marketing team, one of the things that we communicate internally, right, is culture is brand is culture.
Yes.
So it's exactly what you just said, Brett. I mean,
yes.
we actually tag it that way inside the company.
I love that. Oh, I love that you actually tagged that. Now that's gonna be in my back pocket for whenever I say that. I tend to repeat myself a lot for anybody that listens to the podcast or goes and sees us speak on something. I use the same analogies, so this helps me keep it fresh, Tim. Now I can pull from this and make the same point. Love it. I love it. Well, Tim, you've been so generous with your time and with the information you're sharing. Is there anything else on this topic that you want to add that perhaps I didn't give you the opportunity to speak about, with regard to, just navigating mergers and acquisitions, especially through the lens of company culture, employee engagement, things like that? Anything we didn't give you a chance to talk about?
I think we covered a lot of ground. So there's nothing that pops in my mind above and beyond what we've talked about. I just really appreciate you having an interest in hearing about our story and what we've been through. And I always enjoy talking with you, Brett.
Oh, the feeling is very mutual. And yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming on. And we did cover a lot of ground. And at the same time, I feel like we could just keep rolling and you and I could keep going all day. But I don't know. I feel like our listenership at some point will drop off. So we better be fair to them. Well, as a thank you, Tim, for sitting down to speak with me today, I kind of gave you a warning about this. This is the part where I like to pause the show and just give you a few moments to plug whatever is most important to you right now. It could be a company initiative idea, you name it. It could be learning how to fly, or all those other amazing things. You're raising chickens, whatever is most important to you right now. I just want to give you a moment to speak about it.
I actually, there's something I love teaching folks that I work with or people that I'm friends with. And I've had this list of things I wanted to do before I die, since I was 21 years old. I'm 59. And somebody challenged me, write down a list of 100 things you want to do before you die. But every time you cross one off, you have to add one back. And I've kept that list alive since I was 21. I look at it every year. It keeps me driven. It keeps me having a purpose-driven life. If you want to go down another book that was fun to read. And it's forced me to do things that, I forced myself to do things that would be easier just to sit on the couch and watch, streaming video for hours on end, but I actually get out and do a lot in life. And if you've never done that, it's really hard to write down 100 things that you want to do before you die, by the way. It's forced me to travel to 55 countries in the 30 years that I've been married to my wife. It's forced me to get my pilot's license at 59, that I wish I had done it when I was younger. It's forcing me to, I say it's forcing me. It keeps me driven. It keeps me goal oriented. And it just makes my life very broad, challenging, fulfilling. So just from a philosophy standpoint, I've got a ton of people in my office have done it. They've taken that challenge on, and they've come back to tell me sometimes weeks, months, or years later what a difference it's made in terms of setting goals, aspiring to be a better person, aspiring to do things that push them beyond their comfort zone. So that's always been important to me.
I love that you shared that, Tim, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like that is something that so many of our listeners can really take and grab onto. And I mean, I wrote it down. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take you up on this challenge here, and I'm going to do it. Just because I look at, we haven't known each other that long, but long enough where I've gotten a really good sense of you and what you've gotten to do in your life, traveling. You've told me about some of the exotic places you visited, some of the exotic foods that I'm not sure I'm brave enough to try, that you've shared with me that you've done. And it just seems like you are living such a fulfilled life, Tim, and I'm so happy for you for that. And if this is one of those secrets to get you there, I encourage everybody to do exactly this. Like, let's all follow Tim's advice. I'm going to do it. I'm going to write the 100 things down. And you said the rule, right, is you accomplish one, you got to add one. Is that so? Yeah. There's always 100.
There's always 100. It's not.
Okay.
The Bucket List movie came out, and he was crossing them off before he died, right, and then he died or whatever. But this isn't that kind of a list. I call it my death list, but it's actually I call it my live list.
Live list. There you go. I like that. The live list. All right. We got some great advice from Tim there. That's perfect. Tim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. It's truly been a pleasure. I have to warn you, this may not be the last time I want to have you on this podcast as a guest. So,
hey, anytime, Brett. I always like
fair warning. Feeling is very mutual. So I want to just do a quick recap because Tim, I think, provided us with some real good gems. Just a couple recaps of some of the highlights that we talked about. And there's so much more. So please just rewind and listen to this episode again. But a couple of the key considerations when going through merger acquisitions, the list that Tim had brought to us was, number one is people. And then we're looking at processes, systems, and I think geography. Let's keep it on the list. I know that was somewhat specific to this situation, but for any merger and acquisition, if you're acquiring a company with different locations or multiple locations, like geography is a consideration. So these are some key considerations to pay some extra attention to. Now, some of the tactical steps that Tim and his group took in terms of combining company cultures. So we did recap this a bit earlier. I'm going to do it again. Set expectations. In this case, Tim's group set expectations of caring internally and externally. Demonstrate those expectations each and every day. So it's not just talk, but we want to actually show up in that way that we're talking about. Start to introduce subtle changes while utilizing change management tactics. A very simple one would be explain the why behind the change. If you do nothing else in change management, explain the why. If you want to take it a step further, have your entire group read Who Moved My Cheese? Great business book, especially in times of change. And then having a we versus us. So when you're bringing two groups together, it's not group A who has acquired group B. It is now a complete us. And really keeping that in the forefront. These are some of the tactical approaches you can take to really bringing your people along, getting that buy-in and combining cultures. Tim, real quick before I wrap up, did I forget anything? How did I do on the summary there?
Oh, you did a great job as always, Brett. I think you nailed the key points. Again, with so much nuance blended in all of that, right?
Of course. It's not as simple as just a list, right? There's plenty of nuance. And again, I encourage everybody to just rewind and re-listen to this episode because Tim has given us just golden tips here throughout the whole process. So thank you again, Tim. I want to also thank our listeners and our viewers for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget to please like and subscribe if you are getting value from the content that we're putting out. We want to hear about it. You can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts at these days. Please give us a rating and a review while you're there. We want to know how we're doing. You can also watch, like, and subscribe on YouTube. Please visit exploringpotential.com for more information about our team and the work we do, as well as cinetrain.com to learn more about the work we do specifically in the cinema and entertainment space. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.